Hello again. I think I can honestly say that I'm pretty neutral about Nigel Farage, in that I am neither opposed to him nor am I a supporter. I detest both the current Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, and would regard literally anybody in the kingdom as preferable to either of them in 10 Downing Street. But that does not mean that I believe Nigel Farage is uniquely fitted for that role. It is beginning to look, though, as if it might be a realistic proposition, which was not the case even 6 or 9 months ago. What would this be like, a government led by Nigel Farage? The first observation I feel compelled to make is that in many ways Farage is simply another politician on the make. That is not a criticism, but simply a fact. He may represent himself as a plain man who will reform our political system, but I very firmly believe that his motive all along is the same as it has been for the last 20 years or so. Nigel Farage desperately seeking power. He's absolutely gagging to become the leader of this country. His primary concern, in other words, is Nigel Farage rather than any high-flown principles. Of course, he would not have been able to get to the position he currently occupies if he did not have that egotistical drive to be number one, to lead the nation. Many great Englishmen have had that same feeling, that same drive pushing them on. I'm thinking of people like Cromwell, Wellington and Churchill, for instance. So I don't think that this burning ambition is necessarily a bad thing. The second thing to bear in mind is that he is just as prepared to lie to us as Starmer and Badenoch are. Reform promises low taxes and better public services, but this is of course quite impossible. This promise has been made, even though Farage and his fellow MPs know very well that it is nonsense. In a way, I find this reassuring because it tells me that Nigel Farage is a practical man who will do what it takes to win the next election. If he were some starry-eyed idealist, then he would have warned that we could have low taxes and poor public services, or high taxes and better public services. That he and his party offer us low taxes and improved public services tells me that he is a realist who knows it would be fatal to be honest and open with voters. I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Farage as Prime Minister. As I say, he could hardly be worse than the last half dozen or so that we've had to endure. How long an administration run by reform might last, though, is open to question. I say this for the following reason. Because Labour and the Conservatives have been taking turns at governing the country since the end of the war, they always have a bunch of MPs in both parties who have had experience of government, who know how things work. This would not be the case with reform, and I seriously doubt if either of the major parties would offer to help them out and explain how things are done. This could be awkward. Something of the kind happened a few years ago when there was a rash of British National Party councillors being elected in some local authorities. In Epping Forest, for instance, there were a few such people, and there was an agreement by the Conservative, Labour and the Loughton Residents Association that nobody would explain anything at all to them, or give them any idea how local government actually worked. Those councillors didn't last long. I can't help wondering what would happen if 350 Reform MPs entered the next Parliament, men and women with no experience of being MPs, let alone cabinet ministers, and then somehow they had to organise a government and run everything effectively. I have an idea it might turn into a bit of a shambles. I like the idea of a completely new style of politics in this country, but the challenges are pretty stiff, and I'm not sure if even Nigel Farage could actually pull it off. But I suppose we're going to see in a few years' time.